Okay, cool. That's good. So Rhinoceros, it's kind of become the standard for jewelry, like digital jewelry making. And it's something that I dabble in. Like, I get really excited about doing these demos because I also am interested in making like small sculpture and jewelry objects. And last time we taught this, I actually sent my models to a company called Shapeways and had them cast it and send it back to me. So I have those that we can look at in a little while. You can kind of see what they sent me, and I can talk about what I paid for it and everything. But the Rhino interface is pretty graphical, and it uses various menu systems for access to the tools that you want to use. So like along my left bar here, there's a lot of like graphical tools, but all those tools also exist in like these menus up here too. And you can also type the names of them in your what's called your command line. So those of us that are aging gracefully probably remember MS-DOS and typing things into the command line to access programs. It's sort of similar, and it's a really fast way to move through Rhino. So that's something that you'll actually always need to pay attention to, because it's continually asking for input and kind of giving you output. So that's a really, really important part, is that command line. Some other parts of the program you want to pay attention to are on the right side, and where my mouse is here, you've got like a rainbow donut, something that looks like a piece of pie. These are like rendering bits here, so if you're into like, making photorealistic renders of your model, we're not going to go over that specifically, but that's what those are. And then there's the help function to the far right. So the help function dynamically updates whenever you click a command or you enter a command. It will update with, so if I click on, say, if I want to make a box, it will update to that and basically walk you through all the different sections of that command. So it's an extremely useful tool to have up while you're using the program. I actually learn new things from it frequently just by having it in my sidebar. And then, so like the rainbow donut here, this is what's called your object properties. So if I had an object in the viewport, and we'll give it a little perceived volume, and I select it, that actually updates with that object. So that's a really good resource to give you information about your models. The layers tab is basically like Photoshop layers, right? You can work on various layers in Rhino, and we can turn them on, turn them off, we can lock them, change their color, or whatever. It's just a way to distinguish different objects. So if you have several different things you're working on, it's a very useful tool to like hide things and whatnot while you're kind of trying to parse through your work. So that's kind of like the general like layout of the program. There's a lot going on. You'll maybe use like 10% of it most of the time. It's a very dense program. So we're just going to kind of cover the basics. And so one thing I would really like to look at first is just navigation. So how do you like move within this 3D space, right? When we're used to navigating like in our personal 3D space. Now we have this computer screen that we're kind of, is this veil between us and the digital world. And we have to kind of compensate with that. So the first thing I'm going to do for that is to just put some objects in here. So if I go down to this box and I click on it and hold, this menu pops out. And these are all my solids. So these are basic solid shapes like box, cylinder, sphere, cone, truncated cone, pyramid, truncated pyramid, tube, torus. You got pipe and some extrude commands. So if I just want to put some basic shapes in my kind of work area, I have 4 different views, so you can kind of see me moving my mouse within those. You can, if you want, just focus on one of these by double clicking on the name of it, and it will zoom in to fill up your screen. Then when you want out of it, you double click it, and it will return you to your 4 views. We'll just kind of maximize perspective. I find myself mostly working in this view. And so we'll just drop a box in here. And you can kind of see already the command line is asking, like, okay, what kind of box do you want to draw? Right now we're in what's called a 3-point. So basically X, Y, and Z. So it's asking me, okay, what's my other corner length? Let's say I want to draw a 1-inch box. I put 1 in, hit enter. What am I drawing in? Oh, inches? Everything's just very small. So if I put 1 in for each of those dimensions, it gives me a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. And then I can add other shapes. If I want another cube, or if I want a cylinder, I can just draw things in too if I'm not worried about their overall measurements. So I've got a few objects on this surface here. You can kind of see it as a ground plane. So this is what's called your construction plane. This is where all of your objects kind of end up when you're drawing with them. And it's really useful to know how to kind of move around within this space. So you can see me kind of rotating here. So the right mouse button allows us to rotate. The left mouse button allows us to select. If we've selected a bunch of stuff and say we don't want some things, you can hit Control and click on what you don't want. I once looked up the most used shortcut in Rhino, and it's Control left click, deselect. You can also see this kind of multi-directional system on all the objects that I'm clicking on. Rhino calls this the gumball. So this tool allows us to what's called translate our objects in 3D space. So if I click on this, I can move it in the X, Y, and then I can also move it in the Z. So it allows me to fairly easily position my stuff in 3D space. Okay, so we can kind of start to build things, right? These are all, of course, still separate objects, so we can see their curves. We can see what they're made of without their kind of shading on. If we wanted to use these objects to say like union or use one to make a difference in an object, so like subtract part of them, we can use commands that are called Boolean operations. So that's right next to our solids. So I can go under Boolean and pull that out if I want. And across the top are going to be all those commands. So you've got union, difference, intersection, split, blah, blah, blah. So I can rotate around my object with my right button, as you can see. If we're like off in like, no man's land, and we're trying to find our stuff, there's a command you can hit. Should be zoom. Used to be zoom all. Oh, there we go. If you click zoom and just click zoom all, and extends. There we go. Then it zooms you into all of your objects if you get lost. So that's a really good one to keep in mind. Another one that I find myself using is zoom selected. So I select one of these objects, and I can just hit this left mouse button, and it focuses in on that. And as I rotate, it rotates just specifically around that object. So that looks like a frying pan with 2 eggs in it. That's one I use a lot. So let's take a look at those Boolean operations. So if I go Boolean union, you can see the command line. It's asking me if I select surfaces or polysurfaces to union. So if I just wanted to union these right here and hit enter, now they move as one object. And if I look at their wireframe, I can see that they now kind of where they've intersected has become one unit. And this is really important as far as 3D printing goes, because you don't want a bunch of like disparate objects just kind of shoved into itself. They have to be unioned. Another command for moving around, so you've got right click to rotate, left to select. The middle mouse wheel scrolls us in and out like most programs. If I hold shift and right click, that's a pan, so I can move around, up, down, left, right. So I think to get you all kind of just oriented in this space, I think just to start, it would be good to kind of start generating some solids in Rhino and just practice moving them around, intersecting them, and practice using some of those Boolean commands too. Does anybody have any questions about that stuff? We're going to start real basic first.
How did you cut out the solid part where it was just the lines?
Oh, how did I make it just look like lines?
Yeah.
So that's under your view up here. So if I right click on perspective, that gives me all my, so I can go to wireframe. Ghosted's also pretty useful. Kind of allows you to see through things. Yeah. Yes?
Can we get that sheet or that printout with all the commands?
I looked for that on my computer. I'm not sure where it's at, so do you have it from last time?
I do not.
Okay.
It was definitely really helpful. I can
Yeah.
look for it though.
Yeah, I'll look for it too. It's probably somewhere on here. But as I said, I wasn't not as prepared as last time.
I can actually start rotating that now and get those things posted on Canvas.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll work on that while y'all.
Let's take a look at see. Okay, there we go. Let's take a look at a few of those. So one was, how do I know if I'm in the right units? So a lot of what you all do is probably in millimeters, right? In jewelry, is that correct? Or am I wrong about that? Nobody's answering me, but okay. I'm in a void. All right, so the way that we do that is, let's see if I can unfreeze my screen here. Okay. So the way that we do that is if we go under File and we go to Properties. So this is kind of the inner workings of Rhino. We can adjust things in here. But you want to go to Units. And then your model units, you want to be in millimeters. And then you say OK. And then it might ask you to scale things. And the only reason you'd want to do that is if you were in inches and you thought you were in millimeters and you were working to that scale. Like, you know, an inch in millimeters is 25.4 millimeters. So if you were making something 25.4 inches, you'd want to scale that. So normally, if you're in this, you tend to say yes. Okay. So it scaled all of my stuff to millimeters. So it was working in inches. Does that kind of make sense? So you go File, Properties, Model Units, and then you want to select millimeters. So that puts us in the right units for working with these models, and really for working with the resin printer itself. The other question I got is, how do I go about like rotating my objects? So we can do that a couple of ways. With the gumball tool, you'll notice it has those translate arrows. And if you don't have that up, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see this button my cursor is at, or here. And if I click on it, it goes away. If I click on it again and it's highlighted, then my gumball shows up. Because sometimes you actually don't want it. And you can turn it off. So I can translate this. I can also rotate this with the gumball. So I can rotate it, you know, fairly arbitrarily. I believe there's a way to type an angle in, but the way I usually rotate something, like if I need an exact angle, there's the rotate command off to the side, or I can type it up in the command line, and it gives me my command. And if I want the help menu up, if I need help to do this, it gives me some kind of prompts. So right now it's asking me for the start of the rotation axis. So this is what it's going to revolve around. So we'll say, you know, I want it to go from this corner to this corner. So it's going to spin around that. So my first reference point, I'm going to use like the C-plane here. So the bottom of the box. And then I can tilt that around that axis so you can see it spins. So my second reference point would be like a point on that angle. So, you know, if I wanted something at like 17 degrees, right? So now I've just rotated that object like, you know, in a more exact manner. And then of course I can move that around. I can, you know, I can rotate any number of these things on all axes, right? So it's really easy to kind of start manipulating things that way. The gumball also allows you to scale things. It allows you to scale things proportionally. It allows you to scale things along axes, if you'd like. So right now you can see it's scaling and it's kind of stretching things because I'm not aligned with the object anymore. Oops. And undo is Control Z if anybody's curious. So I can scale things proportionally though too if I like hold shift and grab one of those handles at the end here. That scales it proportionally. It's like hitting the lockbox on, Photoshop or Illustrator. So if I want to realign this gumball to my object to make things a little bit easier for me, there's this little white circle. You can see it highlighted there. If I click on that, I can say align to object. Right now it's aligned to my C-plane. So my C-plane is that it's called a construction plane. It's that floor we're looking at in our program. So if I click on align to object, this will move, or it should have. I don't know why I didn't. Come on, buddy. Well, I don't know what to tell you. It's supposed to move. Oh, now, see, this one's aligned to the object. So when I pull one of these, it's actually correct. But yeah, this one's still stretchy. So, it doesn't work all the time, I suppose, but align to object should allow you to rotate your gumball into a better orientation for not just your C-plane, but your object. Were there any other questions that came up in that kind of brief moment you guys were working? No? Is that all pretty easy stuff for you then? Yeah? Okay, great. All right, moving on to some more difficult things then. So, we're still talking specifically about rings, yes, Haley?
I think that for starters, that's a really great place to start.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody will, depending on their level of experience and what their goals are for the project.
Yeah.
May or may not really be using rings, but I think it's a really useful kind of baseline learning tool.
Yeah, so do I.
It covers a lot of things that can then be manipulated into other different forms and other ways of using the software. So are you interested in this? That's the answer.
Yes.
Yes, rings, yes.
Okay. So I saw a few people messing with the torus, but of course that's like the simplest ring, right? It's basically made for us. So we have this guy here. Super easy start. So there's our ring. Say we need to kind of work on the center, right? Because we don't want it to just be a donut. We can take a cylinder and if I want to place this precisely, there's things called object snaps, so they're called O snaps. So at the bottom of your screen, you've got O snap. You can turn it on and off. You've got all these little checkboxes that are particular geometric points on your solid objects. So end, point, mid, center, intersection, tangent, quadrant. So this is just bringing it back to basic, geometry. But so and it'll alert you when you've snapped to something. So I want to snap to the center of this thing. I get close to the outside diameter of it. And that allows me to then, I can see just kind of pulling out this circle, which is the start of my cylinder. And up here, of course, I can put in an exact dimension. So in millimeters, I could put in that exact dimension. Right now, I'm just kind of playing the eyeball game. But we'll get this intersecting with our torus, right? So maybe we want something like so. And then I want it to extrude, let's say, on both sides. Okay, so now we're intersecting the center of that torus. And there we have our cylinder. So then we can look at these Boolean operations. So if I'm looking at Boolean difference, I can subtract from this ring. So it's asking me select surface or polysurface to subtract from. So we grab this, press enter to continue, subtract with this cylinder, hit enter. And now I have something that looks more like a typical band ring, right? So, okay. You're saying, all right, that's all well and good. You know, what else is there in life, Scott? Well, lots, students. So what we want to do now is kind of add some complication to this, right? So, you know, we can add various surface treatments if we want. So, say I maybe want to array some shapes around this. That's a really useful way of duplicating things. So maybe I'll take another basic solid like this sphere, and I'll snap to, let's see, do I have quadrant selected? No. So maybe I'll snap to a quadrant, which is right there. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Say, okay, I want it intersecting about yay much. Then I'll decide, like, okay, you know, maybe how many of these do I want? And what do I want kind of the overall surface to look like? Maybe I want to radiate them only around part of it. Maybe I want them to go 360 degrees. But we can use something called a polar array. Whoops. Or it's probably array polar. Array polar. That's also down here. So that's polar array. And if I enter that command, array polar, it tells me wherever it's at, right? So it's under the transform menu, under array and polar. Wherever array is at, there we go. And then polar. So you can access things in many different ways, whatever kind of makes sense to you. So we're in that command, select objects to array. So, whoops, not that one. I wanted that guy. Enter when done. And then we're rotating around the center of, okay, there it is. That's good. So it's rotating around the center of this ring. Number of items, we'll say, I don't know. Someone give me a number.
11.
Thank you, Haley. I appreciate your participation. Okay, angle to fill. So this is where I tell it to either fill 360 degrees or whatever angle I want it to fill. If the default is usually 360, so I say, okay, enter. And it's giving me a preview right now, if I can move this out of the way, of what that's going to look like when I select that. So if I say, okay, that looks great, or, you know, maybe I'm like, well, actually, I want, 15. So I can type that number in and hit enter. And then it'll update that preview dynamically until I accept it. All right, so I like those. That looks cool. So we can do our zoom selected so I can get a more kind of favorable look at this thing. So now I can choose, do I want innies, do I want outies? do I want some of them to be Boolean subtracted? Do I want to keep it like this? Then we can use our Boolean commands again. So say I want to, difference about half of them and then union the other half or whatever, right? So I can go through and say, okay, I want to subtract from this ring, enter to continue, subtract with, maybe I'll just pick every other one. Hit enter. Whoops, I guess I picked that one.
Gave you an odd number.
Oh, I did.
Gave you 11.
I put in 15,
Oh, you did 15.
which is another
Yeah,
odd
yeah,
number.
so.
Screwed myself again.
Is it
So,
possible to change the last rule that you used to, for example, change it from 15 to 16?
yeah, well, not really. I've got to like undo it and then undo it back to this point, and then I can rerun that command. So if there's another command if there's a command that you've already typed in recently and you want to run it again, all you have to do is right click in the command line, and then most everything I've typed in here or ran is already there. So I can go, okay, array puller, do that again. So this is where like making copies of your work is generally important. So like, if I want to keep something, like say I want to keep this base ring, I can hit Control C and Control V, or I can drag out whatever object I want and just tap the Alt key. So if I want to select all this stuff, I can drag it out, tap the Alt key, and that makes a copy. So it's good to have like multiple working stages of your stuff. And if I want to be like, okay, this stuff is all great, but I want to put it on a different layer and just to get it out of my way. So back to that layers menu we talked about. I can click on, layer, whatever layer I want, right click on it and say, all right, change object layer. So whatever I have highlighted, I'm changing its layer. So now it's on the red layer, and I can say, okay, let's just turn that off for right now. I just want to work on this one. But we can always go back and pull those parts from that layer if we want. But yeah, so Boolean thing again, if you want to difference that, boom. You can hit every other one. And then I'll look like I had some planning in this one. Oops. Track from, forgot to hit enter, press enter to continue, then select my parts. There we go. So those are subtracted out, but I've still got these guys. If I want to keep them on there, I'll want to Boolean union them. So with this command, I can actually select whatever I want to union. And as long as they are two intersecting solid objects, it's really important that they're actually solids, right? So it can't just be like an open surface, because that is infinitely thin and it contains no volume. So there you can see they kind of trimmed themselves up to that. So that's a quick way to kind of like make a ring with a torus. Super simple. How's everybody feeling with the information so far? Do you want me to kind of keep going down the line of things? Yes, I got a thumbs up. Cool. All right, so other ways you can kind of utilize objects to make like something. You can use, so we're just talking about solids. Curves in Rhino are probably still one of the most powerful things inside of Rhino to use. So your curve tools, So we can access those. We can click on here, and that gives us a big menu of curve tools. I tend to stick with the standard menu and use kind of like a few of the standard curves seem to do pretty much most of what I want. So if I just want a circle, like that, and sometimes it's easier to model things like in a straight line. So if we have, a series of boxes, however we want to make them. And we'll make them kind of intersect each other. Cool. And then maybe I'll do a Boolean union. So now they're all one. And then maybe I'll be like, I kind of want to stretch them out. So I'm using that gumball to kind of like scale it. And then I'll think like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like, what else can I do to this to kind of give it a little bit more interest? You can do some interesting things with like the transform tools. So either from the transform menu, we could maybe do like a twist on this object. So for twist, we want to twist these, enter when done. Start of axes, we're going to pick this midpoint here. And we'll go to the midpoint of this end. So now it's asking me for like a reference point. So somewhere out to the side of our object. So I'm just going to click. And then I can start to add like a rotation to this. So something as simple as a box starts to become ever more complex. Huh? I know. Anybody who was in here last semester, it was April 1st on one of the days, so I did a pasta-based modeling exercise for one of our, which led me to some of my work making things with macaroni and casting them in metal. But yeah, we can talk about that in a minute. But so that's a straight line. So how do we make a ring out of that? You can take a line, and I'm just going to draw like the length of my object, roughly. Maybe a wee bit longer. And then I'm going to run a command that's called flow. So flow allows us to take this series of objects that we have kind of strung together, and we pick like two control curves. So the curve that I have next to my object and the circular curve that I want to wrap this thing around. We use those two curves to drive the geometry that we've just made. So we're taking it from straight and we're just kind of bending it around this thing. So I've got that all connected, and then I can take it and say flow. Whoops, that's not what I want. Flow. And then select objects to flow along the curve. So that's this dude. Base curve is your the curve next to your object. Target curve is the curve we want to go to. So there, it's on the inside. That's not what I want. So you got to kind of play around with it a little bit. There we go. That's a little better. So that's a little funky. Let's shorten this up a little bit. And then move that into like the center of our object. Sometimes that it's really sensitive to where like your base curve is. So I've moved it into the center of my object. I'm just gonna turn on some ghosting. Oh, people are so inconsiderate. So we'll turn on ghosted so you can actually see. I don't know if that's any better, but there's our curve there. Change the layer. That'll be helpful. So our blue curve's going through there. So we'll try it this way. So flow, base curve, target curve. What you gonna do? That's a little bit more interesting. So if it's kind of like a little bit out of whack, you can rebend your shape with the bend command. So that's under transform, bend. And sometimes that's the way to bend things around. I know. Some of the commands have gotten like real weird.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it doesn't want to cooperate. And then, of course, you can kind of like clean that up if you want with a cylinder. Move that. Like whatever your ring size is, you could drop that in there. Boolean difference that. Kind of pops a hole in it. So you can do some pretty complex geometry with really just a few commands. Let's see. What else? Haley, can you think of anything else that's really beneficial? I mean, I've got a lot that we could go over, but I'm just thinking like basic things. What else is good?
Piping.
Oh yeah, pipe.
Pipe will probably be really helpful.
Yeah.
You can change the perimeter and the
What's that?
cross-section views of the ring, like it needs to be, you know what I mean? Like, like.
Sweeping rails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Piping and sweeping rails.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go over those two things.
And then that'll be a lot.
And that'll be a lot. And I might just introduce the sub-D tools so you can kind of see what they are. They act completely different. At least I'm getting some exercise. Okay, yeah. So yeah, sweeping and shoot, what was the other one? Oh, the piping. Yeah.
Piping first is straightforward and then sweeping.
Yep. So if I just have a circle and I can run a pipe on it. So it's allowing me to I can either eyeball the diameter, or I can type it in, but I can do that. And then point for next radius, so I can click on this. I can add another one, and another one, and kind of so on. Come on, buddy. And once I'm kind of satisfied with my cross-sectional diameters or radiuses, you can just hit enter, and then it runs a surface over those diameters. And then, of course, if you wanted to clean up the inside, we can just snap a cylinder to that circle that we made and intersect that, pulling that out. Like that, so you kind of have a cleaned out space. The sweep or the sweep 1 or sweep 2 are really interesting commands. I like them quite a bit. So it can be pretty simple. So now we're going to be constructing objects with curves. So if I'm just kind of thinking okay, what do I want my cross section to look like? Just going to start out with a circle. So this is going to be my ring. This is my cross section. So I start out with that circle, and then let's say I want another circle there. So I'm just using curves to kind of construct a form here. And I can, if I want to, trim out any one of these spaces. So the command called trim, you can access it through this this guy here on the side, this icon, or you can type it, trim. And then you can pull up your help menu if you want. But so selecting cutting objects, sometimes I'll just select everything. And then I can kind of just right click then to accept that. And then I can just kind of clip away at stuff. And then, I don't know, maybe I want these kind of intersected like that. I want to do another trim. So right now, these are all separate lines. I want to select all of them and join. So now all of these are, if I go to my object properties, it's what's called a closed curve. So the space that is inside this curve is now like quote unquote closed. Okay, so now I need to take this curve. Let's see. There we go. Get my gumball kind of situated correctly. So I'm going to rotate it 91 direction, rotate it. And the way I'm getting it to snap at 90 is I'm just holding shift. That's kind of the hotkey in most programs to snap to 90. Same in Rhino. And then I want to move it, so I can use a move command here. So I can move from a specific point. So I want to move this object from, we'll say, this point, and then I want to move it to this quadrant or whatever. So the way sweep works is you need a rail and a cross section. So we have those two things. So sweep 1, select rail, select shapes to sweep, and enter when done. And now we have that in the shape of that ring. The cool thing about this kind of like the way this works and working with curves is we can manipulate our curves using what are called control points. So you'll kind of notice when I click on my curves, all these points pop up around it. So I can actually click those points and I can drag it up if I wanna, or down. I can even rebuild this curve by using the rebuild command. So if I type in rebuild, click on that. So now it's asking me like, okay, your point count is 8 and your degree, so that's like the fall off of the points that are affected if I move 1. So the higher that number is up, the more it affects the curve down the length of the curve. So we'll say, okay, that looks great. So now if I select that point, it's a little bit more of a graceful fall off, whereas before it was very tight. So I can use that to manipulate my overall geometry. So now I've made things harder for myself. We'll keep that on the rail. And we'll mess with another section here. Okay, so then we can take this and we'll sweep it again. No. Rail, and then shape, and enter. Enter again. And you've got these options here. You can kind of mess with that based on what kind of overall look you're trying to get, but I think the basic options are generally pretty good. So then you can see it just follows that rail kind of right along it. So that's a way to kind of get more complex shapes and the like. So the last thing I just want to kind of introduce today is what are called sub-D tools. So this is brand new in Rhino 7, so I haven't had a ton of time to play with it, but a lot of the students in the digital fab class, they've been using the sub-D curves to model, and it's pretty exciting what they've been able to do with them.
I have a question. Do you
Yeah.
want to spend a few minutes just kind of playing with the tools that you
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. Before moving into the 7D stuff. I mean, I don't know what it is, Scott, so does it make sense to get going? Okay. So yeah, put your starting point and let's kind of follow along. And I'm going to have to pay close attention too. This is new for me also. And then I didn't use it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely we'll do trim. Okay, so Rhino 7's been a huge upgrade over the past versions. This was an area where I think Rhino was always lacking. So what we've been using is called they're called NURBS surfaces. So it's a non-uniform radial B-spline is what it's called. And essentially it's like you're pushing a surface through mathematical curves. Sub-D modeling allows you to use meshes essentially to make much more plastic organic shapes. Rhino is typically a hard surface modeling software and was really bad at this for many years. So this is pretty exciting. And you can use a lot of the other tools that we went over with the sub-D tools, but I just want to show you some really exciting stuff. So if I take a torus, like we did last time, and draw it out, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but so we can see it's still got that chunky middle, but now it's made out of all these panels and these lines, which are called edge loops. And we can kind of filter what we want to select here. So if I select this button, which will allow me to just select the lines, and so it's saying select edges from loops, so I can select that and hit enter. And now I can take that line, that loop, and manipulate it. I can just hold shift, and now the whole center will just kind of flatten and open up. Right? So that's really cool. Like you can't do that with the other type of modeling. So the other really interesting thing that they've added is something called reflect. So basically, something you do to one area of your object, you can set up to reflect on the other side. You can set up multiple planes of reflection. So if I want, I can type reflect and select the sub-D to apply reflections to. Start of reflect plane. I just want it to be the middle here. So I'm going to snap it like that. Come on. There we go. And now it's asking me to pick a point on the side I want to keep. So this side. So now anything I do, so if I go back to those edge loops and select that, hit enter. So now anything I do is reflected on the other side. So this is really useful for if you're making symmetrical things, of course. This is totally brand new, so I'm not like completely confident in it, but I just really want to show it to you because it's really, I think, going to be the way Rhino is going to be shifting. Another thing you can do is you can add more edge loops in areas that you want to work on. So I can, let's see, where are you at? I was just using these earlier. There we go. So insert sub-D edge loop or ring. So I can click on this button. I can click on either this one or the other, axis direction. But so now I can duplicate that loop, and it actually starts to adjust the geometry. Of the piece. Other really interesting things you can do are essentially, you can just select a face. So if I get the selection filter, okay, I want to just select a face. Let's hold shift to select a few, and then I can delete those. Basically creating an opening in my shape. And really interestingly, I can then select this, select that outer curve, and then I can just pull on it.
Oh, here. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then I can just say like, okay, well, I want to throw a patch on there. So I'm going to say fill sub D hole. So we filled that area in. Let's see, what else did I want to do? Let me undo that real quick. Let me duplicate that edge curve real fast. We want to get, so they're like, if you're kind of noticing those edge curves react, they're almost like anchor points. Let me insert another loop along this edge. Just a little ways. Hello. It's a little ways down. Ah. And then let me throw a patch on there. So it gives me a little bit more definition. And then I can even do this weird thing. It's insert sub D edges. So I can take that and create another face. On the inside there, like to continue working with this if I wanted, right? So I can like push that in, create a cavity, or I can insert that, I can inset that again even.
I'm really glad this is being recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but yeah, it's real weird. But you can do some really interesting stuff with it. So like over here, I simply made like who's in it? Come on, let me select this thing. What's happening here? My Rhino is being buggy. What happened? Oh, there we go. Is it all line? Okay. So like over here, I mean, I simply just use like two boxes. So like if I'm in sub D tools and I just grab a solid. So all these solids are similar to what we've already been working with. They just look a little bit weirder. So if I hit tab, actually, this is like toggling your view between sub D. It's like the virtual and real.
How are you doing that?
It's the tab key.
Oh, the tab key.
Yeah. And like you can see all my sub D objects actually look kind of strange without that. But basically what I did is I kind of just deleted these faces. What I should have done, so I can set up reflect. And pretty interesting thing you can do with sub Ds. If there's like two areas that have open faces, you can do a bridge. This will probably look a little different than my previous version because I had edited it more. But sorry. So selecting your first edge, and then hitting enter, and then doing the second edge. So you can kind of bridge between objects, and then I can adjust, how many creases I put in there, all that good stuff. Manipulate them very easily. So it's just such a plastic way of modeling now. You can do a lot of things you just couldn't before. Like over here, I was essentially working on like some headphones. I thought that'd be kind of a funny ring. Essentially a set of headphones you'd slip on your finger. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that is really easy to play with. Definitely have your help menu up. And whatever you find out, like with the sub D modeling, please bring it in because it's so new to me that I'd love to know what you all find out about it. So that's my little spiel on sub D. Okay, so I'm going to end the recording here.